All right, thank you very much indeed for staying with us. It's now time to start our interviews for the day. We're starting with, of course, education and the House of Representatives. They've been speaking about education, free and compulsory education for Nigerian children. And I'm sure there's been quite a number of all kinds of policies and programs from various state governments, even the federal government in the past. You know, I remember there was also the school feeding program to also encourage children not only to go to school for free, but to also be able to have some meals while in school. But then again, whether or not we have had a sustainable agenda to drive free education in Nigeria, plus all of the challenges with the economy and security and everything else, whether indeed this is something that is visible in the near future, we'll get to know from this conversation. We have someone joining us who is an education development expert joining us virtually this morning, Dr. Aderonke Kujore. Thank you, Dr. Kujore, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
See you again. All right. I'm sure that you are very familiar with the reality in terms of education in Nigeria, access to education, quality education, and the challenges that we have with infrastructure, with the teaching staff, with power supply, with water supply, and above all, security in a lot of places. We've had incidences in the past, where schools have been attacked and all of that. That also has taken its toll on how much excitement parents have to send their children to school in some parts of the country. And now the people in government, and specifically the House of Representatives, are saying it's time to have free and compulsory education for the Nigerian child. Do you think this indeed is apt at this time?
I think it's not a new story. Nothing has changed. I think we've had policies in place for a long time now that advocate free education for our children. But I think it's time now that everyone begins to talk. I think what happened in the House recently is a clear show that we do not have all hands on deck. It's a clear show that we do not have concerted leadership. And it's a clear show that it's time for more people to raise their voices and bring accountability to the table. The fact that a legislature is not familiar with all the work that's going on and needs to bring this to the floor of the House shows that a lot is missing and we don't have the right leadership driving this yet.
Absolutely. Perhaps it also tells you that that we don't have the kind of coordination that you expect, for the education sector. Let's start with budgets, for example. Over the years, we haven't at any point in time met the recommendation for how much should be budgeted for education. That's also a big issue. And then you talk about funding, although there are some interventions here and there. For example, we now have, we have the Education Trust Fund, and then now at the level of the higher education, you now also have the student loan program and all of that. But we still haven't been able to get to that level where we're able to boldly make the appropriate budget for education. Is that also part of the challenges or the setback that we have at the moment?
I actually think a little differently. I think if you look at the most recently approved budget, I think there was roughly a little over 31 billion for instance, the Commission for Out-of-School Children and Almajiris. There's a lot of money in there for education across the board. I think the question there is, how are we using these funds? And so it's funny that even at this time, I'm not an advocate for increasing the education budget nationally. I think I'm an advocate right now for accountability. The question is, what are we going to do with the budgets that we have? I think it would be rather irresponsible to continue to increase the budgets without a show of accountability on the budgets that we've already had. So I think the leaders of the different parastatals in the education sector need to go make good use of the money and be accountable for every single naira that has been allocated to them, and then we can talk about increased budget. Because if you're not spending the money that has been allocated to you efficiently and effectively, there's no case for additional budgets. My fear is that the monies that have been actually allocated, my concern is that those are actually used for the right purpose to get children in school, as opposed to for some of the other miscellaneous administrative activities.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kujore. I'm just wondering, which should come first? Is it to encourage and mobilize children to school for free, or to fix infrastructure, to fix power supply in the schools, water supply, sanitation, and of course staffing? Which should come first?
Sure, I'm actually of the school of thought that we need to get the children off our streets and in schools first, whether these schools are, our traditional school buildings, or we are, leveraging other buildings, churches, mosques, other community centers temporarily. I think we need to get the children off the streets. And the reason why is because many of the children, especially in the north, that are on the street pose a significant risk when it comes to terrorism and access to group Boko Haram and some of the other terrorist groups. So I think our first point of action is to get them off the streets and into buildings. Once we get them off the streets, I think the next point of action is making sure that our teachers are equipped to actually teach them. As you would be aware, we have too many teachers that do not have the right qualifications, do not have the right skills, and are not properly equipped to teach them. Even if it's making sure that our children are in school Monday to Friday, and our children and our teachers are getting training or support education on Saturdays, just to try to support them the week that is coming ahead. I think we have to do that. So getting the children off the streets first, then equipping our teachers to make sure that they're able to deliver proper learning, and then thirdly, we can get into some of the infrastructure issues and making sure that their classrooms are conducive for the children.
All right, thank you. Indeed, I was just also thinking about this thing about free education. In reality, there's nothing is free in reality, because someone has to pay. Some government will pay through taxpayers' money. So in reality, there's nothing comes free. But if you look at the experiences we had in the past with some kind of policy that seemed to encourage children to be in school, like the program, the school feeding program, for example, there were lots of controversy around accountability, and whether indeed it was not just another way, to just pull out funds from government purse and then claim that children are being fed. And then when you hear the amount that is being spent on feeding children, you begin to wonder, by now all the children should be obese, if this much money have been spent providing food for them. So isn't this also, the current call by the House of Reps, isn't it also going to be some kind of opportunity for some people in government or around government, to continue to, put our national treasures into their private pockets?
No, I think we already have that situation. I think, which is why I believe that our focus right now should be accountability. All our education leaders should literally be meeting with the House Committee on Education, maybe even on a weekly basis, to account for everything that they're doing with taxpayer money when it comes to education. So I think I think we have that problem already. It's also the reason why I say that we do not really need to be increasing our budget for education right now. We need to be making sure that the monies that we have is well spent, because if not, exactly what you describe will happen. We'll just have more taxpayer money going into the hands of the wrong people and the children not getting served. Definitely, it's time for a strong hand from the Senate Committee on Education. It's also time for sort of citizens, parents, and citizen groups across the country to continue to raise their voice and make sure that our education leaders are very uncomfortable with the current situation. We cannot just continue to tweet here and there or have this side-by conversations. I think we need to begin to stand in front of their doors and make sure that they understand that this problem needs to be solved yesterday.
Wondering, there have been questions, as I've seen people or heard people talk about the mode of education or the type of education that is appropriate for Nigeria, and usually they give the example of China, where you have well over 90% literacy rate, whereas these instructions or educational instructions or details are not dished out in any foreign language. There have been proposals or talks about why can't we develop some kind of homemade mode or type of education that can be impactful, that can also address our peculiar concerns, rather than just adopting the Western style education and just dumping it on our people. Some people think that we can actually grow faster if we develop what is peculiar to us in terms of the types of educational instruction that we dish out.
Sure, I think the current educational curriculum is actually unique to us, right? So it is Western education, but it has been retrofitted for the Nigerian audience, if you look at the details of the actual curriculum. If we're talking about being able to deliver basic education in our native languages, that's a no-no. And the reason why is because the world is not prepared, and we are not prepared to ensure that our children have all the resources they need in the language, in their indigenous languages. So, for instance, we had a group of children out in the East that got an opportunity to get some technology education, and when the teacher got into the classroom, they realized that the children don't even speak English, and so even that there are people out there, NGOs out there willing to provide free education to these children, they cannot receive the education because they don't even speak basic English. I think we need to focus on making sure that our children across the board are literate and are able to speak English. It's a global language. It's the easiest for us to deliver education in consistently. So it's important for us to make sure that our children are able to speak English so that they can get the education that is out there and available. We don't have the capacity or the infrastructure right now to ensure that we're able to translate computers or basic curriculum into 100 and something different languages. And whether we teach a child, if we look at an Ijaw child, for instance, and we say that we want to teach them, they have to pick from Yoruba, Igbo, or Hausa, it's the same for them as speaking English. And so we need to standardize and make sure that all our children are learning English and are able to receive the instruction that is available, because we do not have the capacity to teach all our children one basic language or the infrastructure. We cannot compare ourselves to China in this respect. The Chinese language is really becoming a global language at this point, and they have invested a lot in ensuring that all resources are available in that language. So we can't compare ourselves to them. We need to focus on English and make sure that all our children are off the streets, literate, and are able to do the basics. In terms of how we deliver it, though, they're beginning to become many different options. One of the options that I think we haven't leveraged at all or looked into is the option of using technology for education delivery. It will solve some of our problem when it comes to quality of education and the lack or the gaps that we have in our teachers, because it can be done consistently. But I think that's one of the options that we need to start to consider, whether homeschooling and the use of technology is an option for our children children, but really need a strong hand to ensure that all children are receiving the education. Otherwise, if they're not receiving it, that their parents begin to face the consequences of not providing that education to them. There are free modules, there's free education available through technology online by the federal government, and that needs to be more widely or popularly sort of spread so that children that may not have the ability to get into four walls of school have access to that, whether it's through community centers, churches, or other organizations.
All right. Now let's start to break it down. When you talk about education, does it have to be essentially about reading and writing? How about vocational education? I mean, does it have to be formal, or does it have to be the types of education that will make you aspire for blue collar jobs? Where do we place vocational education in all of this conversation?
Sure, I think it's not one or the other. Our goal here is productivity, citizen productivity, and so if we're thinking about it in that way, what is it that is required for our citizens to be active participants in our society and to be productive? I think it's a combination. I think at a baseline, all our citizens need to be able to read and write so that they can move through society in a productive manner. And then on top of that is where we begin to ensure that citizens have the right skills to be able to basically live good lives, basically work and provide for themselves and their families, whether it's through vocational education, whether it's through going to universities and seeking for blue collar jobs. That's the second level. But it is impossible to live a productive life in today's society without being able to read and write. Healthcare is a basic amenity for all citizens, no matter what type of, walk of life you're in, whether you're a bricklayer, a plumber, or a professor in a university. And if our citizens cannot read their prescriptions from doctors, they'll end up getting the wrong prescriptions. If our citizens are not able to transact in the bank, if we fail to give them the basic literacy and they're not able to transact in the bank, then they get cheated, and that's where you see many instances of fraud and 419 and things like that. So it's important for every citizen to be able to read and write so that they can transact in the banks, so that they can make sure that their healthcare is properly administered to them, so that they can make sure that when their business grows, that they're actually able to read the contracts that they're receiving and they're not being scammed by foul players in society. So it's both. It's not one or the other, but it's literacy and numeracy is something that has to be learned from childhood before you even get into the skills acquisition.
All right, so let's look at corporate citizens, corporate bodies and corporate organizations, including, of course, non-profit organizations as well. What role should they be playing in this drive and this new renewed advocacy for free education in Nigeria?
They all need to be lending their voices. There's no citizen group that should not be lending its voice right now. Every corporation needs to have a voice, a representative that is fighting for a basic education for all our children, because they will receive the impact of it when they cannot find a workforce that is equipped to be able to do their jobs and compete globally. Today you see many workers who are not able to write a simple piece of communication without issues, and it stems from education. And so corporations need to begin to lend their voice and ensure and push our legislatures, push our leaders to ensure that there's a basic education for all children. Same thing for nonprofits, same thing for the citizenry. We really need to be at the doorsteps of all our education leaders on a daily basis. You look in some countries, and depending on what is on the agenda, you have certain parts of the country where people are protesting on a daily basis until that issue is resolved. That's what needs to happen from an education perspective. Every Friday, every Friday, nonprofit groups and corporate organizations need to be sitting at the front doorsteps of all our leaders, whether it's at the House of Assembly or at the Ministry of Education, and their placards should all be saying, we demand a basic education for all our children. Let's start from there and see if we don't make impact. But if we sit in our living rooms and do nothing, there's no reason for our education leaders to actually make a difference. We continue to sort of dance around the issues until the 4 years of their term is over and then somebody new is in the office. But we need to be they all need to be making their voices heard loud and clear and making it uncomfortable for education leaders to move through life every day without resolving this issue.
Thank you very much. Let me take you away slightly from, children education. Of course, we're still going to stick with education. I'm sure you've been following the news and all of the unfortunate incidents, concerning the JAMB result, the UTME results, and what has eventually turned out to be that there were challenges with the system. The body responsible has apologized, and now they're seeking some 380,000 candidates to receive the examination. What do you make of all that has transpired, concerning the exams, the failure rates, and some of the excuses, or perhaps some of the analysis, in terms of some people thought at the time that it was just because students weren't reading, education, the education quality of education had gone south and all of that. But it turned out to be that it was not any of those, as we know today.
Sure, I actually think it's not one or the other there either. We still do have a problem with our children not being prepared for those exams for JAMB. But in addition to that, obviously, there were administrative issues. And I think that is just a show of the how degraded our establishments or our systems are. An exam like JAMB should not be coming out to the public with those kind of issues if we have proper leadership and the systems are properly tested and properly vetted well in advance. This is not something that is done once in a blue moon. This is something that has been done every single year for lifetimes at this point. And the fact that we have a management team that is not able to get a simple piece of technology out for children to test is really pathetic, and is a show of how bad our educational systems here are in Nigeria. Because it's not that we do not have the skills, it's not that we do not have the capacity. You see Nigerians all over the world doing literally impossible things that no one else around the world is able to do. The fact that we cannot deliver a clean testing environment for our children that is cogent and that we can rely on is just to show that the system is really rotting in so many ways and needs a complete revamp. We need leadership with stronger hands to ensure that these kind of things do not happen in the future.
Kujora, just before I let you go, I like your comments on the student loan scheme that is currently on in the country. In recent times, there were reports that some universities were changing students. There were some kind of levies that were being pulled out of the loan and all of that. What do you make of the scheme and what we know now about how the implementation is going?
Sure, I think it's a good scheme. I'm glad I'm glad we have it because it provides opportunities for more children than we had in the past. Again, it comes down to implementation, and with implementation requires accountability. The minister has said that none of that really happened, but again, sometimes it feels like we're leading with sound bites. I think until we're able to implement these programs with clear accountability, showing exactly what is happening with every naira of taxpayer money. We have not yet, we cannot say that we're successful yet. Like I said in the beginning, for all our education programs, those in charge of it need to really be accountable and reporting on a weekly basis to leadership and to the public on all that they're doing with every fund that they're getting, and showing us the progress that they're making. And if they're not making significant progress that is commensurate to the budgets that they're getting and the responsibilities that they have, they need to be swapped out as quickly as possible. This current administration has not a lot of time left to show what it has done with the time that has been given to it, and we need to swap leaders out really quickly if they're not able to deliver, because we know we have the potential in Nigeria. We have leaders with capacity.
Thank you very much. That's a good place to leave that conversation. Dr. Aderonke Kujore is an education development expert. Thank you very much indeed for your time on the show today.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll move to our next interview for the day. Do stay with us.